program where we bring you insightful discussion on the importance of global health topics. And I am your host, Irene Okechukwu. Today marks the World Autism Awareness Day, which is observed on the 2nd of April. This day is dedicated to increasing an understanding, acceptance, and support for individuals on the autism spectrum. Autism is a neurological condition that affects how people perceive the world and interact with others. While every autistic person is unique, many face challenges in communication, social interaction, and sensory processing. However, autism also brings incredible strength, talents, perspectives that enrich our communities. With a theme this year, Advancing Neurodiversity and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which underscores the importance of embracing neurodiversity and highlights the integral role of individuals with autism in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which also encourages inclusive practices and sustainable effort within society to support and empower autistic individuals. And of course, the day highlights the importance of inclusion, education, and equal opportunities for autistic individuals. As usual, if you want to be part of the show, you can follow us on our social media handle @OfficialRapidTV. Stay with us as we shed light on the importance of awareness, acceptance, and advocacy on World Autism Awareness Day. In the program today, we'll be speaking to experts as they will be bringing us a better understanding of autism and explore ways to create a more inclusive society. And today, we have Dr. Chioma Nicole Ibe, who is a mental health specialist and a volunteer for the International Human Rights Commission. Dr. Ibe, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And also we have with us Barrister Udochukwu Ono, who is a legal practitioner with the International Human Rights Commission.
It's a pleasure to have
Thank
you.
you. You're welcome. And lastly, we have Mr. Fidelis Onapoma, who is a media head, I think the media head of the International Human Rights Commission.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
It's great having you on the program Health 247.
Thank you.
All right, for those who be wondering what the International Human Rights Commission has to do with today's program, yes, the International Human Rights Commission is an intergovernmental corporation dedicated to peace building, protecting, and promoting human rights for all individuals, with particular focus on the vulnerable and marginalized population. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the program Health 247.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, you're looking beautiful today. All shade of today. So, okay, just running over to you. Today being the World Autism Day, what do you have to say about the world, about autism, and how can it be diagnosed?
Okay, so autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects communication, behaviors, and social interaction of some individuals.
Okay.
But what I mean by neurodevelopmental, it means that it's what they are born with. It's just basically the way their brain functions, but in a different way. Just like I said, neurodevelopmental. While as a child, it develops differently than other people's brain function or structure.
Okay.
So I don't usually like to call it a condition. I usually want to call it like a situation, because I feel like everybody cannot have the same kind of brains. We have neurotypical brains and we have neurodivergent brains. So neurodivergent brains are the brains that belong to autistic people, not just autism actually, other behavioral disorders like ADHD and all of that.
Okay.
So how we can diagnose this situation, like I said, is usually during childhood, from 2 to 4 years old.
Okay, 2 to 4.
Yeah, there's some specific behaviors that a parent might notice in their children. They might consider it odd or eccentric, just unusual, different from other kids. Sometimes you can notice that your child avoids some kind of emotional connection. They don't really like you hugging them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or they don't like to make eye contact, or they make some kind of repetitive behaviors by always arranging their toys in a particular order, or they just like a specific color and nothing should be anything different from that specific color. Or they are sort of socially withdrawn. They don't connect with other children like how it's supposed to be. So these are some cues that some parents can actually identify as early as possible. Although sometimes autism is actually diagnosed as when a person is an adult, because not every parent will be able to identify this. Some people actually miss out on those cues. Yeah, but even as an adult, adults can also be diagnosed of autism.
Interesting.
So most of the time there are also some other standardized what will I call it now, diagnostic techniques. Yes, we have one called autism developmental observational technique. It happens in the hospital though. It's just by behavior, basically. Sometimes some MRI scans can show some differences in the connectivity.
Like at what age?
A small, just
Tender.
a child that's 2 years old is early enough to actually be able to identify it as an autistic person.
So what is it with this color thing? Because when you meet an autistic child, the child is always attracted to colors. So,
Okay, that's not going to be every autistic child.
Okay.
Because it varies, It's expressed in different ways. Autism is a spectrum, meaning it's from one end to the other.
Okay.
It can be very severe, it can be less severe. A lot of people are autistic, but they don't even know they're autistic. They just realize that they don't understand the world. They can't really relate with people.
Yeah.
They see this, they interpret the world differently from others, but they don't know that they're autistic.
Interesting.
So when it comes to colors, the thing is that autistic people have some, like I said, repetitive behaviors or maybe specific routines that if it's disrupted, it overwhelms them. It makes them uncomfortable. So they just like things to go the way they want it to go. It's just the way their brain is structured and wired. Okay,
you were talking about this autism spectrum disorder. So how can it manifest on individuals and how do you address it?
Okay, like everything I have mentioned, first of all, behavior, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned repetitive behaviors.
It
could be a person that is always flapping their hands or their feet constantly. Maybe when they're anxious, you might not know that is also repetitive behavior. Or there are some people that when they wake up in the morning, they have a specific routine and it can never be disrupted.
Wow.
They are usually perfectionists, They want things to go the way they've imagined it or the way they want it.
Wow.
And secondly, social interaction. Some of them don't understand some social cues, like facial expressions.
Okay.
They just don't. I think I'm just going to summarize it as they cannot relate with the rest of the population.
Wow.
Not everybody, but some of them.
Okay.
They just don't understand the way you think, because the way they think is quite different. There's this disparity. Communication as well. It might just be different. They don't like facial eye contact, and all of that. I think it's easy to identify these things in people.
So basically, our understanding with autism, do you think it has evolved over the years?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Oh, really?
A few years ago, when you hear about autism, what does it sound like? A disability, right?
Yeah.
But with much more research and awareness, people are beginning to understand that it's just neurodiversity, like the brain just having a variety of kinds, basically, like structures and functions or connectivity among brain cells. It's just different, and people are beginning to accept autistic people. People are beginning to understand that it's a spectrum. You don't have
Okay.
to be intellectually disabled to be considered an autistic person, because some people are intellectually disabled, but not everyone. And some people
Yeah.
are also geniuses. I'm sure you've heard of some autistic people with
Yeah.
some exceptional skills.
Exactly.
And some people just have average intelligence. So these are things that we are beginning to identify over the years, and also before there is no kind of way to actually identify it in the brain. But now there are MRI scans
Okay.
that have been discovered, or basically specific features that have been seen on this. You know what MRI scans, right?
Yeah.
Magnetic
Please, for my viewers who
resonance.
do not understand.
Okay,
please
it's a
explain
form
better.
of brain scan.
Okay.
You might be seeing it in movies, or
Yeah,
where
just they
people
go for
enter like
MRI
a
scan.
covered,
Yeah.
just to view the brain,
Okay.
brain activity.
To examine the brain.
Yeah,
Okay.
examine your brain. So there's some there's a recent research though that happened in Stanford. They are understanding that there are different kinds of connectivities in the brain that make it different from other people.
Okay.
Like they call them neurotypical people, like other
Yeah.
people that are not autistic.
Exactly.
They call them neurotypicals. While people that are autistic, they call them neurodivergents. So
Wow.
they are noticing some differences in their brain functions, structures, connection, and all of that. So these are like latest researches.
So basically, what are those challenges that most of these autistic individuals face, especially the female and the male? You see, when I'm talking about the challenges, when it has to do with the female, you know, I want to use when they reach their puberty stage, they are quiet. Everything disgusts them. Then about the male, they don't even want to come close to anyone. So can you tell us the challenges when you are trying to diagnose it as a doctor? Yeah.
Okay, so most of the time
Yeah.
when these cues are missed as kids,
Yeah.
they grow up, and as an adult or maybe an adolescent,
Yeah.
especially ladies or females,
Yeah.
they
Okay.
these symptoms are masked, and this is because sometimes they try to fit in with the neurotypicals.
Yeah.
So you see them trying to force facial eye contact or rehearse conversations, not knowing that they're actually struggling to do so. A lot of young people actually face this, and sometimes it leads to burnout. They become so overwhelmed, they start having anxiety, symptoms of depression. And when you go see a doctor, it's not easy to diagnose those kind of things, because you might just think that this person has maybe social anxiety, and you start treating the person for a mental health condition,
Why it's not that.
not knowing that it stems from something else. They're struggling to understand the world, but they pretend. Females do it more, just because they're trying to fit in. Then the males would just, like you said, they just be socially withdrawn. Why?
Yeah.
Because nobody understands them, neither do they understand the population.
And they get irritated easily. If you find it, not even if you find their trouble, if you're trying to assist them, they think you want to attack them, and they will even try to even attack you before you do anything.
Yeah, it's because of the lack of awareness. People are not sensitized to this topic, so people don't know how to handle such situations. So of course they're going to get irritable,
So what are the early intervention for effective therapies for such?
Yeah, so identifying this condition as a child, it's definitely going to shape the person's future significantly. So it's very important to be able to identify this, so that early interventions will begin and the person is going to grow up, adapting, adjusting to the society, and basically leading a successful, fulfilling life.
All right, thank you so much. Let us just move over to the legal practitioner who has been listening to us. I'm sure he has a lot to tell us right now. So over to you, Barrister Odochukwu. What are the key legal rights of individuals with autism in our country?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I want to, flow from the maybe international treaty. When we look at the United as Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability, the convention is what gave rights to people who are disabled. Disability might not be maybe someone who is just insane or blind. It's all encompassing. Then when you now come to our own domestic laws, the Constitution itself, the 1999 Constitution, from section 33 to 46, provide what they call fundamental human rights. These are rights that, as long as you're a human being, you automatically have rights to that. So when you look at section 34 specifically, which is a product of section 33, which is right to life.
Okay.
34 talks about right to human dignity. It goes to show that every human being ought to be treated fairly and justly. So for the fact that you are a human being, whether you are rich, poor, healthy or sick, you have the right to be treated fairly and justly. Anything that goes contrary to that is an abuse, and such ought to be treated with utmost legal sanction. Then when you look at section 13, I talk about freedom of expression. Now, an autistic person might not be able to interpret just like what doctor said, be able to express his or herself in a way you might understand, except when you have that patience and empathy to be able to communicate with them. Because communication is about encoding and decoding. If I'm not able to decode what you're encoding, definitely there's no communication.
Exactly.
Now it goes to show that I must be able to understand you first in order to be able to give you feedback. So you must be able to understand an autistic person, be able to give feedback. So they have the right to expression, and whereby they cannot express themselves, the people who are the victims, by extension the parents, should be able to tell you how they feel, and then you have to accord them that right, and there is a provision for that. And when you look at section 42, it talks about discrimination. So an autistic person, if you look at subsection 2 of that act, provides that no person should be denied his or her right by virtue of circumstance of birth. It is specifically stated there, birth. So if because of his or her birth he is an autistic person or albino or whatever class of disability he or she has, the person must not be prejudiced for any reason. If you do that, the law, section 42 sub 2, is there to give that person a shield. Then when you look at the Person with Disability Act 2018, which came into force, you look at it, it gave provisions as to their rights and what they ought to be given to. When you talk about education, we talk about shelter, socialization, they ought to be, you ought to just treat them fairly.
So going further, how well are these existing disability laws enforced when it comes to autism?
Okay, as it stands today, there is no specific law that talks about autism in Nigeria. To the best of my research. However, that's Person with Disability Act 2018 covers both autistic person, albino, and what have you. And kudos to Dr. Jack Opele. I could remember some time ago we had a meeting, and he is one of the pioneers of this act that came into force. It was by virtue of his advocacy that brought this act into being during the last administration. So now there is no specific provision for an autistic person. However, there is a provision for disabilities in that act. So hence their right stems from rights to education, accommodation, social welfare, whatever you have rights for, he or she also is entitled to that. And failure to comply with that, there are, if you look at section 31 of that Person with Disability Act 2018, gives rights to their rights, and then failure to comply with that stems the punishments that are accrued for anyone who violate that right. For corporate entities, there are fines, and then for individuals, imprisonment. However, the law did not specifically provide how many years imprisonment. However, the law says subject to the court's discretion. So that discretionary right is left at the position of the court to determine. And then the enforcement aspect of it is section 34, talks about how does the law enforce these laws.
So what are those most urgent policy changes that is needed to improve the lives of people with autism? Even though you told us that we already have existing laws with those with disabilities. So what are those urgent laws that needs to be implemented?
Well, currently in the last section of the Senate, the 9th Assembly, we have what they call Disability Rights Bill, which unfortunately was not able to see the light of the day during the last section. And we are looking forward that possibly the 10th section will be able to deem it fit to enact it, and then the president can be able to sign it into law. But pending that time, we are still hopeful. However, for me, I'm not trying to be prejudicial, but however, the extant law, which has to do with the Right of People with Disability Act 2018, is so good that if enforceability can be taken into cognizance, we may not have issues. However, that law specifies that in corporate entities, whatever they ought to be given their rights, it ought to be recognized. The problem is now how many persons are willing to do that. And I don't want to sound a bit prejudicial, but if I should say, even in this studio, how many persons are autistic are employed or employees, I may not find. So we can see that the problem is a general issue.
So I think if I allow you, you will talk and even say you are even guilty of this. So over to you, Mr. Fidelis. Like in your organization, that's the International Human Rights Commission. So why is it that the International Autism Awareness Day, why is it important to your organization?
Well, thank you very much. Today being 2nd April, which started from 2007, was designated by the United Nations to raise awareness.
Exactly.
And the purpose for the awareness is to break down stigmas, breaking down of stigmas.
Yeah.
The breaking down of stigmas is to raise awareness on the stigmas and misconceptions that surrounds autistic individuals and possibly improve a acceptable and inclusive society. Now, secondly, is to also understand this neurodiversity.
Okay.
To recognize the fact that this autism is a natural part of human being, a natural part of neurodiversity, and calling for the improvement of workplaces, employment of laborers. Without the awareness, people cannot actually have idea of what the thing is. And we at the International Human Rights Commission, precisely, through the leadership of the ambassador at large and head of diplomatic mission in Nigeria, who is working tirelessly to ensure that the rights of people are protected, including the people or the autistic individuals.
You just mentioned the ambassador. Please, can you tell us who your ambassador is? Because our viewers will say, who is this ambassador you are talking about?
Okay, Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Durle Zekaya is the ambassador at large and the head of diplomatic mission of the International Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
Under his leadership, the HRC stands at the forefront to fight for human rights. We confront uncomfortable truths and dismantle outdated systems and create structures that balances equity and inclusive societies.
Interesting.
Yes.
So how does the International Human Rights Commission advocate for the rights of autistic individuals globally?
Oh, very simple. In the International Human Rights Commission, I could say that we champion robust legal protections. What I mean is that we translate policies into practices. Because policies without action is insufficient. So in HRC, we translate policies into practices by advocating for enforceable, inclusive education, inclusive policies, and we confront or we project anti-discriminating laws. We also work with government to ensure the implementation of these policies as enshrined in the United Nations Convention of the Right of the People with Disabilities. For example, Article 27 of the Convention of the Right of Disabilities gives the right to education, including people with disabilities and autistic individuals. And Article 27 also advocates for the employment of people. You understand?
Yeah.
Then going further, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 1 talks about that every humans are born free, you know, and have equal rights and dignity. You know, why the Article 2 also prohibits discrimination of persons with disability, including autistic persons.
Interesting.
So in HRC today, we are presenting a call to conscience. People should wake up to the consciousness of building inclusive societies that accommodate everybody. Thank you very much.
Interesting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program on Health 247. I'm sure if we allow you to go and on, you quote your constitution for me, you tell me why we are discriminating in this office. So we are not going to go further. So as we wrap up today's special program on Autism Awareness Day, let's remember that understanding, acceptance, and inclusion make all the difference. Autism is not a disability. It is a different ability, and every individual on the spectrum deserves respect, support, and opportunity to strive. Let's continue to break the stigma, embrace neurodiversity, and create a world where everyone feels valued. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation, and keep the dialogue going. Let's build a more inclusive future together. Until next time, take care and stay informed.